Hey, welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Burdinsky, and somewhere on that split screen with me is the Democratic candidate for mayor of Wallingford, Riley O'Connell. Riley, welcome back to the Citizen Mike Show.
Thank you so much. Always happy to be on here, Mike.
So I hear you're running for mayor again. Any truth to that?
Yeah, that's there's quite a lot of truth to that, I'd say. That's pretty much all I'm doing now. So doing
All
that
right.
every day.
Well, since we've been off the air and the Citizen Mike Show has taken a hiatus during this ARPA thing that started last fall, since we've been off the air, some significant issues have come up in Wallingford, and maybe the most significant because of the money and the people it affects is the decision as to whether or not Wallingford should have one high school or two high schools. And I gather you've been out and about in the community, but tell us about that when you get around to your answer when I stop talking. I gather you've been out and about and have been able to take a pulse of the community as to where it stands on this.
Maybe not quite to say so much as where it stands, but I'll tell you, the majority of the doors I've knocked on, if they say they have one issue that's important to them, it's been the school issue, whether they're in favor of one or in favor of two. It's clearly something that's really motivated a lot of people in town to get involved. And it's something that people are understandably really passionate about because one, we're talking about, our kids' futures here. We're talking about their education. And even if you don't have kids in the system anymore, I think Wallingford schools, for a lot of the wrong reasons, have been in the news a lot lately, or in terms of people's minds. And so I think we can't be successful as a town unless we have a successful school system. So
Yeah, I want to go back to the people that you've talked to and see if we can generalize. If we can't, you know,
sure.
that's fine because there's a lot of time to go on this issue. But not everyone has kids in the school system. Do you find that those people are as engaged? Are they as informed? Or is it just limited to the parents?
I would argue that it's not just limited to the parents because so many people in Wallingford grew up in Wallingford and went to one of these two schools. That being said, of course, the parents that still have students, children in the system or are going to have children in the system soon, are certainly more passionate about the issue, I would say. But it's at the top of everyone's minds. And if we're trying to, get an understanding or generalize, which I think is where you want to go, in terms of maybe not whether the majority of the town falls one way or the other, but why they're, in their particular camps, why they feel the ways they do. I look at the folks who I've talked to who have been strongly against the one school. And the main reasons I'm hearing from them are completely valid. I'm hearing transportation, if you're especially on the west side of town, considering, obviously we don't have a location determined yet for the schools. The Board of Ed has not made that finalized yet, but what's being thrown around a lot is Lyman Hall's current campus. And so we can understand with state statute, state law, mandating that students can't be on a school bus for more than an hour. I believe we already have some buses up in the mid 50-minute range that trying to find enough bus drivers to get students who are taking the bus, first of all, to the east side of town or to any other part of town is going to be difficult. So I think that's one thing that they have to figure out. And then the other thing too, that a lot of the people in the against one school camp are very concerned with what we see at a lot of other large schools in terms of kids kind of getting lost, being a small fish in an even bigger pond, right? And so kids kind of slipping through the cracks in that regard.
Well, we've seen signs on lawns advertising what the occupant thinks about the issue. One sign says, Wallingford says no to one high school. I think another sign says something the opposite. Support all students or something. I don't know what the slogans are, but close to that. So those that want one high school, what are their concerns?
Yeah, so I think it all comes down to the fact that if you look at the performance of Wallingford schools today compared to, 15 years ago when I would have gone through them or compared to 30, 40 years ago when my parents would have gone through them, they've declined. In terms of ranking, in terms of scores, and I realize that's not the end all be all, but it does, impact how our schools are perceived and frankly how our town is perceived. So I think people see, and not to mention all the issues that have been since COVID, and the physical aging infrastructure of these buildings themselves is way past what I would call well maintained. So I think they see that, and they see this one school kind of as the opportunity to not have a fresh start per se, but take that next step with a modern building. And beyond that, one of the things that we've had and one of the reasons I decided to run for mayor in the first place 2 years ago was because we saw a really rapid and frankly alarming population decline of high school age individuals in town. Specifically, our high school attendance, or I should say, our high school number of enrolled students has gone down 30% in the last 10 years. So when you look at numbers like that, it's not a surprise that we've had to cut AP classes, honors classes, just other extracurricular classes that didn't have enough students to really justify having a class. So I think the idea behind having one school, so long as the student-teacher ratio stays the same, which I realize still has not been guaranteed as far as I'm aware, but if that is guaranteed, now we're talking about, a student not having to switch from, DAG to Sheehan to take a certain language or vice versa from Miranda to Lyman Hall. We'll be able to offer more languages, more extracurriculars, and more variety of levels of classes as well. And I think that's the main, at least that's the main thing I've been hearing from folks that are really strongly in favor of one school.
Yeah, I'm going to give you some feedback. I'm paraphrase it just a little bit differently, but I think essentially the same. Those that want one high school point to increased educational opportunities and increased opportunities in general. More students that are in one place can form like a theater arts group, or fill out language classes, or have more AP courses. So, and not everyone is going to take AP subjects. I mean, extracurricular activities, that some of which I've mentioned, are important to many students, and there's more of a chance of that in one large high school, especially if it's state of the art. On the other hand, going from 2 high schools to one is a cultural shock. And there is, for Wallingford, who has this long tradition of 2 high schools, and there's this deep concern that students will get lost in the shuffle, slip through the cracks, and not get the individual attention, and that's a very serious concern. So that seems to be the divide as I hear it. But your thoughts on what I just said? Am I close to the mark there a little bit, or?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think you basically said it in a much better and more succinct way than I did. But yeah, no, it's tough. And the extracurricular ones in particular I'm here. That's the one that I've heard most on both sides.
Yeah.
And the fact that I think parents are understandably concerned by combining the 2 schools, that maybe my son or daughter will no longer be able to have a spot on said sports team, etc. But at the same time, or student government or band. I mean, it's not just the athletics. But at the same time, exactly what you just said, you can have more of these clubs potentially, and more of these, these opportunities in one high school. So a lot of it comes down to how it's done, how it's implemented. And I look at, I had a unique experience with this when I would have gone through the high school system. I of course went to Choate instead, but I grew up going through DAG, and DAG at the time had a very good cross country team. Go to Lyman Hall, and this is also part of a pay-to-play issue, but from lack of students and lack of enrollment, they couldn't, and lack of interest, frankly, they didn't even have enough runners to field a cross-country team. Yeah. And I was a runner. I ended up getting recruited for college for running. So had I stayed in the public school system, who knows how that would have impacted my, future education opportunities. There's a lot.
The gold medal at the Olympics is where you would have ended up if you had.
That's probably, yeah, that's what I like to tell myself, at least.
Probably right. What do you think is the level of information? Let me rephrase that. There's a lot of talking points out there, but the information backing up the 2 divides, the 2 proposals, is massive. I mean, you just can't digest it all. And I'm wondering if parents, voters, taxpayers have the full picture, or maybe they don't need it. Maybe it's instinctual. Maybe it's reflexive that's more important. I don't know. Just weigh in on that, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on this school decision, and I don't pretend to be. I mean, I think I've watched or read or attended every Board of Ed meeting I have been able to, every public meeting to learn about the issue as much as possible. And even then, I feel like I don't have the full picture. That's why we have a Board of Ed who in theory is putting in countless hours to investigate these options.
Yeah.
When it comes to an issue this big, I mean, I think it wouldn't be hard to argue that it's probably the biggest decision the town will have had to make in the last several decades, what we do with our schools. So it's of course going to be complex, and that's why, I strongly feel that this is why we have a Board of Ed in the first place. We have people who, spend countless hours, unpaid hours, I might add, to look into this. And hopefully, and this is where I think we can improve, at the same time, they need to listen to at least the concerns of what people have in the community, because
Yeah.
you can have these concerns, but they need to be heard to at least be addressed.
I want to run another idea by you, and tell me if you agree or disagree and whatever. But the legitimate concern, one of the legitimate concerns is class size and individual attention. It runs the gamut from the advanced students to the B plus students, to more basic levels of education to special needs kids, individual attention, achievement on all levels. And I wonder, to what degree is that a management problem, not a building structure problem? That a good management, good principals, good administrators, a good board, good superintendent, regardless of the size of the building, can deal with these kinds of issues and make sure, no matter what size school building you're in or what size of student body, a good administration won't let anyone slip through the cracks. And it's not a building problem, but a management problem. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we need a Board of Ed that's a Board of Ed and, by association, administrators, superintendent, principals, all administrators and educators down the line, to play an active role into making any of this work.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is where I have to be careful, because when it comes to the job of mayor, my job is to figure out how we pay for it. We don't actually, and that's why the Board of Education is such a unique department in any town, because even though it's a large portion of the budget, the town council and mayor, we don't directly oversee how that money's spent or how those jobs are carried out. That's why we have an independently elected Board of Ed. So I don't disagree with you. I think, in a perfect world, no one slips through the cracks, and you have administrators that are ready for anything the world can throw at them. But, we just got thrown a 3-year in the making pandemic, more or less, that we're really seriously seeing the effects of, I think, in our school system right now. So it's hard to say.
So let's talk about costs for a minute, and then we'll go on to other subjects. My understanding of the costs of this, and my information comes from a bid document, which is on the town purchasing portal. An item went out to bid regarding this. We'll get to that in a second. But in the bid packet, hundreds of 300 pages, I think, was a lot of information and details. That's where I'm getting this from. But one consolidated high school looks like it's going to cost $122,677,271. And if you believe that, I'll sell you a Brooklyn Bridge. Costs for the police station were wrong. Costs for the pool were wrong. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, don't take it too literally. This could grow by 10 or 20%. You never really know, especially depending on when it's built. So this gets us maybe in a very rough ballpark. And the cost for 2 high schools is about the same to renovate as new. So the upfront costs seem to be about the same. Operating one high school has some savings involved, but still it's a massive amount of money, and that is Wallingford share. I'm going to round it to 123 million. Massive amount of money. That's our share after reimbursement. I tried to calculate just on my own using a mortgage amortization table over 20 years at an interest rate that seems to be prevailing, what that would mean. And I'm looking at like 1.5 to 2 mils per year just for the high schools without regard to what the needs of the other schools are. So massive amount of money. I don't know. Is that a hard sell? I mean, does a referendum just stop this in the tracks because the tax hawks say we can't afford it? Or do you think it goes through?
Well, I hope it's not just the cost that stops it in the tracks, if that's the direction this goes, because you just said it. I mean, to repair our high schools as two independent high schools, it's going to cost about the same. I agree. I think those are both very low estimates, but I do agree also that regardless of what the cost ultimately is, it's going to be about the same. And so what can't be an option, which unfortunately I think we've treated as an option for the last 5, 6, 7 years, however long this has been seriously discussed, is doing nothing, because our current high school buildings are truly falling apart. I mean, Lyman Hall, you spill water in a classroom, and because that building's sinking so much on one side, it creates a river going to the other side of the classroom. These buildings have not been, they're old enough as it is, but on top of that, they have not been well maintained for a very long time. And it's not just, the scary part is, you're right, it's not just our high schools. I mean, we have some school buildings in this same study they did, 2 or 3 years ago, looking at the high school options, that show that some of our elementary schools have classrooms that were supposed to be temporary 10-year units that are 30 years in operation now. So 3 times past their supposed lifespan. So there's a lot of planning that needs to be done, because we can't, in 10 years, who knows if Lyman Hall will even be a non-condemned building, right? We can't just forget about, I mean, look at Lyman Hall's track was condemned. If a track can get condemned, I think a building can get condemned too. So there's a lot that we need to plan for. And the really unfortunate part is when you look at those costs, and you mentioned how much of it would be our share versus the state share, the way that that's calculated, or a large part of the way that's calculated, is based on how full the schools are. I think the state, wants to prioritize funding schools that are too small to fit their growing populations. We have the opposite problem. And because we've waited, the better part of a decade from when this was first discussed to actually start planning it, we've lost out on, with that 30% decline I was talking about, we've lost about 30%, potentially, $30 million more or less of what this, or maybe a little less, $20 million of what the state would have paid if we had just made this decision a little bit earlier. So it all comes down to we need better financial planning. And that is where I think the role of mayor needs to play a bigger role.
I want to get to some details as to where we are and where we might be going. But first, I want to talk about the projected enrollment, because projected high school enrollment, because a lot of the discussion is premised on enrollment has been falling, and if enrollment has been falling, the buildings become more vacant, they're underutilized, so on and so forth. So what are the actual numbers? Again, this comes from that bid document. But this year, academic year 2022-2023, total student enrollment, high school, write this down, folks, 1,688. Someone thinks that we can project high school enrollment 10 years out. Well, pay me enough money and I'll write down a figure, and I'll, garbage in, garbage out. No. I have more respect from the professor whoever did this. Nevertheless, it's an estimate. No one really can know what the enrollment's going to be. A subdivision opens up on some piece of farmland or something. Families come in, and that could change everything. But in the year 2031 to 2032, the enrollment drops by 111 students. And to me, that's not a lot. Spread over 10 years and 2 high schools, it just doesn't seem like it's a dramatic drop. I don't know where that takes this argument, but it's one thing to say, well, student enrollment is going to drop. And the other thing is to hear the numbers over 10 years, and you'd hardly miss the students, I think, spread over this large building and all the classrooms. I mean, it's something to consider, but I don't know if these numbers drive a decision. I leave that for people that are smarter. So the question now is, what's going to happen next? And I'm going to get to this bid that was just put out in a minute, but what's the common understanding? I mean, we seem to be in limbo. we seem to be stuck and no forward movement, but maybe that's not true. What can you share with us?
No, I think you're absolutely right. We're in purgatory when it comes to this vote right now. I think,
Okay.
and this is what we feared would happen, or at least what I feared would happen. Frankly, I was kind of surprised the Board of Ed even made a preliminary vote in the first place. At least moving forward with I guess the next step of this proposal. But then for the town council to basically have a vote to not have a vote or agree to not have a vote is really left the whole situation in a really rough, gray area, because you can't have a referendum if that's the direction the public wants to go until the money's allocated. Well, the money can't be allocated until the town council votes on it, and the Board of Ed can't do anything else at this point really to force the town council to vote. So it's this is exactly what I did not want to have happen, which is our town council, and by extension the mayor, kind of sitting on their hands until after this election's over.
It's fear. Is it politics? It's fear of taking a stand and just lay low, get elected, and then kick it down the road 2 more years or something. I mean, is that why?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is why it's taken the Board of Ed multiple election cycles, because it's a 2-year position. So you spend that whole first year figuring out the first budget, kind of getting your feet on the ground, and then by the time it's the next study comes out on the schools and it's time to make a vote to take a next step or not, you're in an election year again, so no one wants to touch it. And now we're in that same issue with the town council, what I think is a bigger problem in itself, because, and this is something I feel very passionately about, it should never come down, in my opinion, it should never come down to the town council or the mayor when it comes to a Board of Ed decision. Now, obviously, when it comes to funding, yes, that's the financials we have to figure out. But when it comes to a decision that's directly, basically an education decision, which this largely is, that's why the Board of Ed was elected in the first place. And so for the town council to basically, if you're against it, totally reasonable, but then cast a vote. Don't just say, I'm not going to touch this because I care more about my reelectability than I care about actually getting work done. And maybe I'm being a little harsh, but that's what it feels like, because I don't know where the next step is now. The Board of Ed kind of played their hand, and now the town council's not willing to take action.
Yeah, so the Board of Ed decided to hire a consultant to help it with the next steps and to help it sell a one high school concept. And the bids for that job, for this consulting job, were opened up this past week, and 2 bids came in. Very strange, the bid results. Remember, this is a facilities consulting job to get this one high school concept. This is not supposed to be balance one high school against 2, because the Board of Ed made the decision already. They favor one high school. So this is to forward and to further advance the one high school concept. And one bid was Silver Petroselli, that architectural firm out of Hamden, and they've been working on this for a long time, since 2018, I think. Compare these 2 numbers. They put in a bid of, I'm rounding, $280,000. The competing bid, Collier's Project Leaders, put in a bid for $84,500, almost $200,000 difference. So when you are the Board of Ed or the superintendent or the mayor or the council, and you look at these bids, something is off. Someone isn't. It's just strange that there's this huge disparity in price, and I don't know what to make of it, but someone's got to figure this out, because as it now stands, it's not tenable to have somebody bidding 84,000 and someone bidding 280,000 on presumably the same bid specs. Your thoughts?
Well, I will say the first thing that comes to mind, which is almost entirely unrelated, but my background was working antitrust crime at the DOJ. Those sensors were tingling. I was like, wow, this is the first time I've seen a healthy bid where there's no bid rigging going on, because clearly there was no communication between those bidders, which is a good thing. But yeah, no, clearly someone has a different idea of what that job entails than someone else, right?
Yeah.
And I think even the way that it's been told to the public, I mean, because the Record Journal obviously covered that, the initial idea of getting this, hiring a firm to do this I don't want to say, you know, part of it's a PR job, like you were saying, part of it's to actually bring that idea forward. But yeah, there's clearly different ideas of what that job entails going forward.
So the next step is sort of to try to figure out what to do with these two bids and who are they going to hire. And then when does the work of this consultant start, and how would we know that the work is starting? Well, there's four components to the bid. I just want to briefly get into it. Part of it is the development of a 10-year strategic plan for all facilities. Development of a 10-year strategic plan for all facilities. I don't know. I mean, I kind of know what a strategic plan is. I mean, if you do what we do, we know, oh, strategic plans are really good. I just don't know what that is. And neither, I don't think, are the bidders, because that's the big disparity. Colliers, for that component, develop a 10-year strategic plan, said 15,000 will do it. Silver Petroselli said 201,000. So obviously anyway, the other component is develop educational specifications. The third component of the bid, or the task, I should say, the task was site analysis. And the fourth task that this consultant is supposed to undertake is communication. That's the PR. Well, how much was that? That's interesting. Well, the PR work was Collier's 10,000 rounding, and for Silver Petroselli, 8,000. Not a lot of PR work there. So now I'm wondering who's going to do the PR work, because the complaints of moms and dads and voters is that they haven't been shown enough love with respect to enough meetings, enough forums, enough question and answer, enough patience to answer maybe the same question and again and again and again. But yes, you have to do that, because not everyone goes to the same meeting, not everyone watches the same video. For something of this size, you have to go out to the community over and over and over, and have a lot of patience and answer these questions in order to try to bring people together to form a decision. So in any event, when I say what's happening next, that's what's happening next. Somehow a consultant is going to get on the job. So Riley, let's get personal. What you want, what you think is best. First, the impasse. Two sides of the argument. How do you bring people together, or do you not bother and just have some sort of a vote and count the votes? The side with the most votes wins. Your mayor, imagine that for a minute, hypothetically. First of all, is it your job to go out into the community and try to orchestrate communication? Maybe not. Maybe it's the Board of Ed or the superintendent, or any other idea you have for breaking this impasse.
Yeah, well, I think maybe not orchestrate, maybe that goes too far, but at least I think part of my job is in theory being aspiring to be the chief elected official of the town, is to have my ear to the town as much, if not more than anybody. And that's why I think I've been hearing these questions so much at doors, or more importantly, these opinions on what's going on. My ability well, here's what I would do to try to, what I don't want, which is currently happening, is this impasse you're talking about. Regardless of if someone's in favor of one or two schools, we cannot continue to sit in our hands. So what I would do, I don't have the authority to force a vote by the town council, but I would bring to the town council as the chief executive, whether it's taking that part of the Board of Ed budget that was used for these consultants, or this firm you were just talking about, or the decision itself as like a proposal or a capital expenditure, and at least force the town council to vote on it. If the town council, they're independently elected. If they disagree with it, so be it. But we can't afford to be in this, for lack of a better word, I'll use the word purgatory again, for every election cycle from here on out.
Be a little bit more specific with me.
Sure.
What would you bring to the town council? What would that look like? What kind of vote would you want? Would you vote on money? Is that what you would?
Well, I think it would have to be, right? I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot of power or influence otherwise that I can bring to the town council without an actual formal proposal. I mean, we've seen this a lot, kind of in a messy way, but play out a lot with the ARPA situation lately, right? Where the mayor has to actually be the one, or the administration more generally has to be the one to bring a proposal to the town council for them to then vote on it. I think, and this is looking out on from as an outsider perspective, when I saw that meeting where the town council basically didn't make a decision on the Board of Ed, it did kind of seem to me that the superintendent was misled by somebody in the administration to believe that there was going to be a vote that night, or at least a discussion about having a vote. So I
So
just
here's what I'm hearing from you, and see if I heard it right. You're elected mayor, you assume office in January, maybe the first half of 2024. You put on the town council agenda, because as a mayor, you have authority to put things on the agenda, a resolution that, or a requested appropriation, I'll make the number up just to illustrate the point, that you're looking for an appropriation of $500,000 as a first step towards the one high school option. And then if the council approves that, the voters can, initiate a referendum. If the council denies that, you're kind of back to square one because there's no possibility of a referendum. But is that the kind of thing that you're talking about?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I think because right now it hurts. It doesn't help anybody. It hurts people that feel strongly on either side of the issue, because people that I talk to, who are very unhappy with the decision, for all the reasons we talked about before, about the previous decision made by the Board of Ed, don't know what they can do about it right now because they can't take it to a referendum. They can't collect the signatures if that's what they want. And then the people who want the one school have no closure on that either. So we have to at least move in a direction so that this doesn't become just a political, basketball, because it's starting to feel a lot. And this has been the case for a long time. It's not like the one school proposal just came up this year. This has been, talked about seriously for, like I said, almost 8 years at this point, and less seriously even past that. And what I don't want to see happen is it to become like these national issues we see where neither party wants to touch because they want to run on them each time. And that's kind of what this is becoming. No one wants to take a hard stance. And I can understand that. But if you're not willing to make decisions, then don't run for office, I guess would be my suggestion.
Well, I want to circle back to an earlier question because I'm not sure I understood your comment. And if you can be as pithy as you can on this one.
Sure.
You're elected mayor, the community's in a divide, the difference of opinion, lawn signs going every which way. People, how do you, more specifically, how do you get people to come together and to understand the issues and prepare them for a vote, either on a referendum or otherwise? What do you do?
I mean, I think it starts with being accessible, right? Not just myself, but I think this is something we struggle with a lot in whether it's commissions or Board of Ed in particular, with having the availability of those public question and answers where you're going to be, we see at town council meetings. This is one of the good things generally that we have about our town council meetings is.
Well, would you host, would you host, I'm going to five.
Yeah, a town forum.
Town forums. Very unruly, free for all, a lot of passion. Ask any question you want. Someone will get you an answer that night, or they'll email you the answer. Everybody come prepared. File your questions in advance so the Board of Ed, the superintendent, the architect can be as prepared as someone, something like that.
Absolutely, and as many times as it takes till people run out of questions.
Okay, let me change the topic on you. So, where do you stand? One high school or two?
Me personally,
you personally, you're mayor. You're going to be elected.
Me personally, as a resident, given that I haven't heard guarantees about transportation and student-teacher ratio,
I'll be worked out.
Well, I need it guaranteed. I mean, I need those guarantees.
Okay.
And our teachers, I think, deserve that guarantee as well. So, as it currently stands, me personally, I'm against it. But just as the proposal currently stands. That being said, as mayor, I have no plans, or not just no plans. I promise I won't get in the way of the Board of Ed if that's the decision they decide is best for our students. These are, like I said, as soon as we break that precedent, or set that precedent, I should say, where the mayor and the town or the town council can overrule an independently elected body whose sole purpose is, making education decisions, then why even have a Board of Ed at that point? And that's what I'm afraid of. And I think Board of Ed candidates on either side of this issue agree with that.
So let me summarize, make sure I got it. If the Board of Ed sticks, because there's going to be a new Board of Ed, I mean, there could be other votes and stuff. I don't know. They may honor prior decisions, but I just don't know. But if the Board of Ed sticks to its position that it wants one high school, then your position as mayor of Wallingford would be to support that and to move it forward in every administrative way that you could, out of respect for the role of the Board of Ed. And of course, that mixes into money and mill rates and everything else. But that's your position, I think. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay. You ready to change the subject?
Sure. What could we possibly be talking about next?
Something very electric. So there was an article in the Record Journal recently about troubles in the electric division and sort of frustration on the Public Utilities Commission. And I want to read just a couple of sentences to set the table, and then let's have a little conversation about it. But it was by Kate Ramuni in June 13. On June 13, it says the labor shortage has hit the town's electric division as it struggles to keep employees and attract new ones. The Public Utility Commission recently held a special workshop on the problem where, according to the meeting minutes, the acting general manager told the commission that he's dealing with both retirements and employees leaving for jobs that pay more with companies such as United Illuminating. A lot more in the article, a lot of ground we've got to cover. But I wanted to go to you at this point. You read the article and you're familiar with this meeting because we both read the minutes of that meeting. Kind of what's your takeaway on what's going on in Wallingford? Are we in trouble?
I think we're in very serious trouble. I mean, I would have no problem using the word crisis, and that's the word I've been using. If I can just highlight in like 3 sentences,
You got it.
Stuck out to me in that article.
Yeah.
Not that in the minutes, I should say the minutes themselves. 70% of our distribution engineers vacant. Those positions vacant. These are the people who actually put the power back on, or play a big role in putting the power back on where there's an outage. We don't have a compliance engineer at all, which on top of that, we've missed several, not one, but several compliance deadlines as a result. And it seems that all but a single apprentice lineman at best are leaving. And actually, since that story even broke, I know of at least one other fully qualified lineman who's also leaving. So we're talking about, and the last thing too is I think they only have, I don't think the minutes suggest they only have 3 management level positions filled left of people who have experience and are qualified to lead an outage response, 2 of whom are leaving in no later than a year, retiring. So I see that, and I see that we haven't been hiring really anybody recently, or at least not holding on to anybody recently, that leaves very serious concerns to the future of that division, the near future of that division.
Yeah, so I'm going to sort of generalize a little bit, a similar perspective, but not exactly the same. Times have changed. As fewer people want to go into water and sewer divisions, maybe fewer people want to be linemen. Demographics have changed, populations have changed, so on and so forth. And the job of attracting qualified people, especially to a small municipal utility, has become maybe just more difficult and requires a response that's maybe a little more aggressive, a little more nimble than the town of Wallingford has been able to execute. So what's happening is that some of the senior guys are aging out, they're retiring, or they get their retirement, move on to another utility, leaving a void. Valuable skills are lost. They need to be replaced. And one of the ways, and at least in the lineman field, I mean, a utility has a lot of different job categories, is through apprentice linemen. So you hope you can attract apprentice linemen to move up to be senior linemen, and that's become a challenge. And town of Wallingford is competing with Eversource, United Illuminating, and other utilities, or even out of state utilities too. So it becomes a problem. I want to give our viewers a little taste of what happened at this meeting because it was somewhat remarkable. It seems to me that tempers flared, patience ran thin, PUC members got very frustrated, and in the end, I don't think anything was solved. But I do want to take some time just to skip around here. And I'm reading now from the minutes. It says the issue that the electric division is facing is our inability to attract first-class linemen. So the next logical path is to hire and train apprentice linemen. We typically post in parallel positions. Historically, all we've seen are apprentices, which helps in the long term, as long as we're able to entice them to stay, over 4 years. However, this does not help the electric division in the short term or during a storm. Mr. Hendershot, who is the Director of Public Utilities, added at this meeting, I'm reading, that he wanted to put an exclamation point on that statement. Although Mr. Arborio was being diplomatic, that statement is terrifying. The way we built the current line crew was through apprentices. All but 2 individuals on the chart were apprentices that we trained who then became first-class linemen. But we don't entice qualified linemen to come here. Qualified individuals are going to other investor-owned utilities due to richer compensation. I'm skipping around. They talk about we could be in trouble if there's a storm. And what I am skipping is comments indicating how fragile and how close to the line Wallingford is with respect to staffing in the electric division. Sewer division is another show. That's got its own problems. That's just another show. So there's a new PUC commissioner, Public Utilities Commissioner, Larry Zabrowski, and he asked about the pay gap between what Wallingford is paying and what the other utilities are paying. Mr. Zabrowski questioned Mr. Hutt, who is the Director of Personnel, as to what he sees as far as closing the gap regarding personnel, as it is an emergency situation. Mr. Hutt responded that Human Resources conducts exit interviews, and there's what's an exit interview? An employee leaves, someone says, hey, off the record, privately, why did you go? Why are you leaving? And maybe they get the truth and maybe they don't get the truth. But as I understand exit interviews in town and elsewhere, there's no record of what was said. There's no quotes, there's no affidavits. It's sort of an off the record statement. And you don't really, also, you may not really know that the employee is telling the truth. And maybe the employee isn't getting along with the boss. Maybe the employee really is getting money somewhere. So these exit interviews are somewhat unreliable, but there seems to be a difference of opinion here, the Wallingford Electric Division, to whether it's money or other things. So Mr. Zabrowski added, this is not a new problem. It's been going on for quite some time. He asked if there was a program or plan of attack. And he didn't really get a hard answer. And so Larry Zabrowski, later in the meeting, came back and asked sort of the question again, how are we solving this? What are we doing? Don't tell me we're working on it or we have plans. What concrete steps can we do? Mr. Hutt said that Mr. Zabrowski is hearing only one side of the story. And here comes the other side of the story. To state we have an issue, this is from the personnel office, to state we have an issue of recruiting specifically because of compensation, salary, and benefits would be a bit disingenuous. That would not be 90% or 80% of the problem. So, if you can't agree on what the problem is, you can't find a solution. So some people are saying it's not money at all. No sense in raising salaries or giving out bonuses or anything else. It's other things. Someone else saying, no, it's salaries and wages. And meanwhile, staff is getting thinner and thinner and thinner. Okay, now there's other things instead of money. Can you, based on your reading, talk about this online application situation? If there's a vacancy, just where we stand and maybe best practices based on your knowledge.
Yeah, so I'll say that's probably was one of the lesser important things that was discussed in that meeting, but also at the same time, one of the most ridiculous parts that came up in that meeting is the fact that we as a town still do not have online applications for jobs for almost every department, which is kind of crazy. If you'll notice, when a new job goes out, and they even talk about it in those notes as well, it's almost always the only applicants are internal applicants. So from other departments, people who are related to people in other departments also came up in that meeting. And the only time you'll see it online is to get someone from the community to post and share the application on one of the Facebook Wallingford forums. So it's really not, to say it's not a modern process is an understatement. There's no excuse for how we are that far behind. Not surprising, unfortunately, but there's no excuse for that. I will say, though, the reason I say it wasn't as important as other issues discussed in that in those notes is because even it would certainly help, and it's common sense. We should have done this a long time ago. But I think it's clear to me that we are not currently competitive for hiring folks anyway. So even folks that are applying, a lot of them are, dropping out of the application process once they see what the wages and the benefits are and stuff like that. So I think both need to be addressed, but one's a little more substantial than the other.
Yeah, so the issue I'm talking now about, well, I guess all personnel, but what comes to mind is the apprentice lineman situation. But there's a statement made at this meeting that the people that are applying or they want to apply are between 28 and 48 years of age. Those people, I'm reading, those people, if they cannot apply online, they will not apply. And so the town of Wallingford claims to have been working on this problem, which to me seems like you could do it by Thursday to get an online application that could be filed online, not, downloaded and printed out and mailed or hand delivered. But it seems to me it's simple to do that. And I guess it's the decision-making process. I guess the red tape, the bureaucratic thinking, the departmentalization of somebody has personnel responsibility, the mayor has it. I mean, it seems to be not a way to solve a very simple problem, yet it apparently is critical. So now there is a position online on the town's website for an in-house position for an apprentice lineman, but you can't file it online even now. I checked this morning. It's up there, but so people aren't going to do it. And then the salary is salary from 5 years ago,
Right.
or from the beginning of the contract. I think 2018. So we're not keeping up with it. So what do we do? You're mayor. What do you do?
Well, if I could just add one more thing on the technology.
Yeah, sure.
Another part that came out in that interview, which I had heard before but hadn't confirmed until those notes came out, was that there is just throughout that town hall, and I think all know who it comes from, a completely combative relationship when it comes to technology. And that's one of the, I don't know if it's an actual reason or one of the excuses, but one of the consequences of that is that our linemen and now the rest of the electric division are mostly on a 3-year expired contract that expired in 2020. And that's because someone in town hall made it explicitly prohibitive to have those negotiations on Zoom or online, for instance. So there's things like that don't make a whole lot of sense. But that's all I want to say about that real quick. But in terms of how we solve this issue, and I think Larry Zabrowski was exactly right that this isn't a new issue. I mean, we're hitting a really climactic moment right now in terms of all these people leaving at one time, but we've been trending in this direction for the better part of the last 20 years. You go back 20 years and you're talking about a 5% difference between what we're paying our electric division employees. And you're right, it's not just linemen, it's pretty much every career within the utilities. We're paying it was a 5% difference between us and other municipalities and private companies like UI and Eversource. Now we're talking about a 30 to 40% wage difference. Guys who are leaving as linemen from our division going to UI making $25 more per hour.
I can't verify. I haven't independently researched that, but I will add this from the minutes. Public Utilities Commission desperately wants a wage and salary and benefits survey done across the industry to see how we stack up. They want it to be credible. They want it to be thorough, and they want it now. And that's really the place to start, to get an independent consulting firm or our own personnel department, if that's the way they decide to go. But that seems to be a slower way to go based on what I read. But something, given this emergency situation, which is not my word, it's really, what comes from the minutes. Given this emergency situation, it seems to me someone, some boss somewhere could say, wage and salary survey. Well, I'll sign an emergency bid waiver because Wallingford has it in its laws that if there's an emergency, you can waive the bid for a necessary thing like the service, and you hire someone immediately to do a wage and salary survey. And again, I get really impatient. That could be done maybe next week, to get that going. But oh no, it hasn't been started. We may never see it ever, even though the PUC is pleading for this. Maybe it's being done behind closed doors, but I tend to doubt it. So
and if I could just add on to that too, I think one of the most concerning things in terms of the disparity between where some of those commissioners were and what they're hearing from the administration is it's not a compensation issue. I can tell you for a fact that sure, it might not be there. There are other elements. I mean, there's a work culture issue, there's a pension issue, there's other things, but to say that it's 90% not a compensation issue is false. I will tell you that right now. I've spoken to so many people who are in these public utility offices who are actual employees of the town and will tell you point blank that's not the case. And while I agree that we could easily do an emergency bid waiver, I also don't think it's that hard. UI and Eversource have many of their positions listed publicly, and the only other competitors we have are the municipalities like maybe Groton. There's not a whole lot of players in the industry in Connecticut when it comes to electric division careers. So I think really in a week, you could look up what the differences are, and they're stark. And the thing is, most of these employees, really all these employees, aren't asking to be paid more than UI or Eversource, or even necessarily as much as. It just has to be within that ballpark, right? And right now, we have fallen so far away from that ballpark. And if you're one of these younger guys looking to start as an apprentice lineman, and you see our town where you can't even apply online, but get past that, they haven't had a newly negotiated contract in over 3 years. We got rid of our traditional pension plan about 8 years ago, so you have much less reason to stay. And you look at the compensation, it's not remotely comparable. So it's all these things, in addition to the fact that because yes, this is a breaking point, but we have been understaffed in this division for a long time. And so a lot of these guys are being asked to do the job of 2 people being paid, a fraction of what they would make elsewhere. So all these things are adding up to just completely, unsustainable situation.
So one of the elements contributing to this problem is a new collective bargaining agreement, a new labor union agreement has not been reached, and I guess they started negotiating during the pandemic. And there's a statement in the minutes that said the town prohibited the use of Zoom so that during the pandemic, management and labor could get together and hammer out a new collective bargaining agreement. The town prohibited the use of Zoom. So here we have, they couldn't use Zoom, so that slowed down the collective bargaining. Online applications is an old idea. Wallingford is still resisting that. And this wage and salary survey should be a matter of routine, should be done, very quickly, and nothing is happening. So, Riley, we got to call it quits because we've run out of time. Time flies when you're having a good time. The sewer division is also facing some crisis in personnel. Hopefully, you can come back on the show. We'll revisit some of these topics as they pop up in the news. And in the meantime, good luck on the campaign trail. But you got the final word. If you want to give a little political pitch, you don't have to our viewers as to where they might see you next, what your platform is, whatever you want to do. You got pitch time.
All right, I'll make it very quick. You'll probably see me at your doors next, or at the garden market on Saturdays is probably your best bet. But no, I mean, I think the key to takeaway here is this only scratches the surface, right? It's all of our public utilities, like you mentioned, water and sewer. Public Works is struggling with staffing as well as and departments past public utilities too. So there's a whole emerging crisis that I think to start with we have to acknowledge that this is a problem, right? Like I love that we're talking about solutions here, but we currently you know, I mean, the town council is yet to discuss this, and we currently have a lot of people who don't agree or want to acknowledge it's an issue. I see 30% distribution engineers out of 70% vacancies, I should say. If I saw 70% vacancies at any company or any industry, that spells disaster, let alone people that are in charge of putting the power back on. So I think the first thing people can do is start looking at this and acknowledge it's a problem. I've taken that step, and I'm hoping to keep pushing these solutions. And yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm hoping to be mayor in 6 to 7 months, whenever inauguration is. But these are a lot of issues that really I don't know if can wait that long. So I'm hoping that we get enough momentum from the community and from some of our elected leaders that are currently there to get some stuff done and not wait until this election's over.
Riley, thanks for coming on the Citizen Mike Show, and thank you viewers for watching. We're going to post this up on YouTube, as you know. I can send you an email link if you let me know that you want notice of shows as we roll them out. And thanks for WPA TV. They put our show up on television also. Good night, Riley. See you next time around.
Thanks for having me, Mike.